The spiritual practice of Falun Gong has millions of followers worldwide. Its sheer size has earned its practitioners intense persecution at the hands of the Chinese government. How does the conflict between Falun Gong and the Chinese Communist Party highlight how China has or has not changed throughout history, especially since the Cultural Revolution? And what does it mean for the future of the Chinese Communist Party? Information for this presentation was pulled from a report published by veteran journalist Danny Schechter and other official documents. A complete list of sources can be found in the final slide. For decades, spiritual beliefs had been replaced by political rhetoric. However, with the end of the Cultural Revolution, China launched into an era of reform during which a return to spirituality was authorized, if not encouraged. A similar reintroduction of traditional Chinese medicinal practices, such as qigong and herbal remedies, occurred as well. As time went on, China continued to experience urban unemployment, widening income disparities, rural poverty, and corruption, as well as varying opinions about increased global attention. Jiang Zemin, China's new leader, had to balance continued economic and political reform with a desire to maintain the party's absolute power as his predecessors had. It was during this time of civil unrest that Falun Gong was created. Li Hongzhi was a self-proclaimed lifelong practitioner of Qigong who started developing his ideas and publishing books in the late 80s. He officially established Falun Gong and went on a brief lecture tour in 1992 before moving to the United States to escape growing persecution. His teachings draw heavily on traditional Chinese beliefs and shares ideas with Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, as well as the martial art and spiritual practice of Qigong. Falun Gong's graceful sets of movements are said to stimulate Qi, or life force, and replace it with Gong, a form of higher energy drawn from the universe. Practitioners are encouraged to cultivate themselves by devoting their lives to the three key principles of truth, compassion, and forbearance. Many practitioners report improved social relationships and overall health, even citing miraculous healings of terminal illnesses as a result of practicing Falun Gong. One practitioner describes it as a way of life that complies with the law of the universe for people to elevate themselves toward the spiritual goal of enlightenment. Falun Gong practitioners typically meet and practice in public parks. Their visibility combined with the lack of membership fees led to exponential growth. They were authorized by the government, and even some high-ranking officials joined the practice. Soon their numbers were estimated between 2 and 100 million followers, with practitioners usually exaggerating their estimations and opposing forces minimizing the number. It wasn't long before a group this large started being perceived as a threat to Communist Party power. The persecution all started with an article published in April 1999 by a state-sponsored writer named He Zhuoxiu. He accused Falun Gong of causing mental illness and being non-scientific overall. Practitioners who gathered to complain to the magazine headquarters in Beijing were beaten back by riot police, arrested, and told to take their appeals to the government. On April 25, 1999, they did just that. Between 10 and 15,000 practitioners gathered in front of Zhongnan High, the headquarters of the CCP, joining in peaceful protest, many of them reading, meditating, or performing Falun Gong movement sets. They petitioned for official recognition and the release of detained practitioners, and, as could be expected, they received a similar response to their previous demonstration. As demonstrations continued throughout China, Jiang Zemin established the 610 office to control what he called something unprecedented in the country since its founding 50 years ago. Falun Gong and any superstitious activity were officially banned in July 1999. Falun Gong meetings, practices, books, and appeals to the government were now illegal. Falun Gong's website was repeatedly hacked into and shut down, and searches for Falun Gong-related words were blocked to try and stop growth in communication. A warrant was issued for Li Hongzhi's arrest, but Interpol refused to serve it because they did not consider disturbing public order a criminal charge. This was just the beginning of their troubles. Chinese Communist Party immediately began spreading anti-Falun Gong propaganda to discredit the group. Some of these accusations were loosely based on reality. For example, Falun Gong teaches the existence of multiple dimensions and supernatural abilities like levitation and clairvoyance granted to those who achieve enlightenment. They also encouraged strict adherence to their teachings. Because of this, they were ridiculed for being non-scientific and were labeled a controlling cult. Other allegations were completely made up, such as saying that Li Hongzhi just started the group to get rich. With no membership fee or mandatory tithe, all literature available for free, and Li himself living quite simply, this is highly unlikely. The most aggressive accusation spread in anti-Falun Gong propaganda is that they have caused the deaths of many of their practitioners through forcing them to forego medical treatment or through causing mental instability that leads to suicide. While Falun Gong teaches that disease is the result of bad karma and that it can be eradicated through self-cultivation, medical treatment and medication are up to the individual. The cases listed in these reports were inaccurate, deceptive, and sometimes completely fabricated. The CCP fought viciously against Falun Gong in both word and deed. There were over 35,000 confrontations between practitioners and police from Falun Gong's banning on July 22nd to the following October 30th. Many practitioners were forced to pay an exorbitant fine and make an official statement of giving up Falun Gong. Those who refused were detained in poor conditions without a fair trial, subjected to beatings, and tortured with electric bugs, sleep deprivation, and exposure. Many were sent to labor camps for re-education, or worse, shipped to mental institutions and forcefully medicated as part of their treatment. Most horrendous of all is the evidence of systematic organ harvesting, with allegations of these valuable organs being removed from a living victim before being sold to the highest bidder. The government did their best to hide the resulting deaths by immediately cremating remains and reporting them as the result of natural causes or suicide. These crimes against humanity soon triggered a global response. While many international media reports were poorly researched and little better than Chinese propaganda, human rights organizations saw these violations and spoke out. The Clinton administration condemned China for the human rights violations. Many government officials wrote letters urging investigation and discipline, and the United Nations invited Falun Gong practitioners to testify of their experiences. But when it came down to it, all governmental organizations were more concerned with China's growing economic power. The year 2000 was spent establishing trade agreements with China rather than censuring their internal societal issues. The conflict between Falun Gong and the Chinese government is reminiscent of many historical events. Examining these events may show why the CCP was so aggressive in its crackdown, as well as show that for all of their reform, little has changed in how China treats divergent groups that grow too powerful. For example, the Boxer Rebellion was started in 1899 by an anti-imperialist insurgent group who believed that practicing Qigong would give them supernatural strength. Although this group was actually supported by the central government in a way that Falun Gong never was, both were influential representations of traditional Chinese ideals during a time of globalization. they were defeated. Starting in the late 1920s, China saw a period where political dissent was particularly dangerous and practically everything was political. Under the nationalists and then the communists, religion and superstition of any kind were disallowed. Anything that could hold China back from its rational, industrial, socialist future were destroyed. This was especially true during the Cultural Revolution in 1966 through 1976, when the Red Guard was established to defend the all-encompassing teachings of Chairman Mao, arresting, imprisoning, and torturing nonconformists in a way so similar to what Falun Gong practitioners suffered. And then there were the student demonstrations in Tiananmen Square and the ensuing massacre. Although Falun Gong demonstrators were not calling for political reform of any kind, their nonviolent protest was so close in location to those on June 4th, and uncomfortably close to the 10-year anniversary. All things considered, it is no surprise that the sight of thousands of protesters gathering, no matter how peaceful, would strike a nerve with the Chinese Communist Party. It seems that China only supports religion if it serves the state's purposes. The Chinese Constitution guarantees the freedom of speech, of assembly, of association, and of demonstration, as well as the freedom of religious belief, though this right only extends to those who do not disrupt public order. While China is a self-proclaimed democratic state that says their citizens hold the real power, if the government feels like any group or individual is too threatening, they are banned from appealing or issuing complaints. Can you imagine being arrested for sending a letter to your government? The CCP further skirts around legal rights by creating and using extra-legal police organizations, such as the Red Guard and the 610 Office, to enforce their interests at all costs. The most recent report on the persecution of Falun Gong was given in 2012 by U.S. Chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. She stated that the number of Chinese practitioner deaths has risen to a staggering 34,000, with hundreds of thousands still detained in labor camps and mental institutions. Despite 6 resolutions passed by the United States Congress since 1999, each calling for an immediate end to the campaign to persecute, intimidate, imprison, and torture Falun Gong practitioners, nothing has changed. In fact, the 610 Office is still alive and well, and have actually expanded their efforts to include 28 other political organizations and harmful Qigong organizations. Whether or not Falun Gong originally represented growing civil unrest or any kind of political movement, it became an outlet for both of these when the government banned its practice. Social inequalities and global visibility are only increasing, and those who are drawn to influential groups like Falun Gong are typically those who have suffered the most at the hands of the government. Will these events actually lead to an increasing call for reform? Could they inspire an even stronger reliance on spiritual strength in this time of political turmoil? Ken Roth, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch, believes continued repression of Falun Gong will cause all-out revolution. The more the Chinese government pursues these ordinary people, the more it's going to push them to become an opposition movement. They may well be pushed to the logical next step, which is to say, we have to change this government.